Okay. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the first episode of the Lorain Public Library System's Meet Your Neighbor series. I'm Donna Kelly Sprinkle from the Avon Branch Library. Tonight, let me introduce David Miraldi, local author and civil trial lawyer. David was born in Lorain and currently resides in Avon. In addition to writing, he is also a photographer and a pianist. Tonight, Mr. Miraldi will present details about the second book in his Edge series, The Edge of Malice. As he's presenting, please post your question in the comments below, and he will get to as many of those questions as possible. David, welcome. We're all excited to hear about your latest book.
Well, thank you, Donna. Thanks for that introduction and for inviting me to kick off your Meet Your Neighbor series via live on Facebook. I'm excited to participate and to tell you a little bit about the second book, The Edge of Malice, the Marie Grossman story. If this were a live performance, I would ask for the people in the audience to tell me how many have already read the book, because it's important. I don't like to spoil any of the story for someone if they have not read it. And so obviously we can't do that tonight. So I'm just going to have to assume that a fair number of people have not read the book and then gear my comments accordingly. I'm going to do, really, it's going to be three things that I'm going to do tonight. First, I will set the scene for the book, and then I will talk about how it came to be that I wrote the story about Marie Grossman, and then finally, I'm going to open things up to questions. Those people who are watching this can submit questions to you, as you indicated, on either the first book, The Edge of Innocence, or the Edge of Malice, or any particular question they would have about the writing process. That would be fine. So let me begin, as I said, by talking about and setting the scene for The Edge of Malice, the Marie Grossman story. We have to return to December of 1987, and Marie Grossman is an attorney, and she spends her entire day at the Cleveland Clinic in meetings. She's not a patient, but this is part of her work. Around 6 o'clock, her meetings have concluded, and she's getting into her car. She's in a hurry because tonight she has to rush over to the other side of town to watch her son participate in a high school wrestling meet. Well, as she gets in her car and is driving down Euclid Avenue, she realizes that she's famished. She had very little to eat for lunch that day, and she sees a Burger King at East 85th and Euclid, and she thinks, I'm just going to get a little snack here and then get off to the wrestling meet. She pulls into the back parking lot, and there's the menu board. She thinks, well, I'll go through the drive-through. There's nobody there. It should be quick. So she goes to the menu board. She rolls down her window and places the first part of her order. And as soon as she's considering what her beverage choice will be, suddenly a very tall man appears at her driver's side window that is down and points a gun at her, and it's about 2 inches from her temple. She realizes that she's being robbed. She's trying to remain calm. She's always understood that in this type of situation, you don't protest. You just hand over your money and your valuables. And so that's what she decided to do. She had her purse on the passenger seat. She picked it up slowly, placed it on the ledge of the open window, said, here's my money. But instead of grabbing it, the man allowed it to drop to the pavement below. And Marie also noticed that this man was making eye contact with somebody on the other side of the car. So she realized that he had an accomplice. with his free hand, he's reaching into her inside of her car to, looks like he's trying to unlatch the door as if he's trying to get in. And Marie says, "Do you want my car?" And he, she says it loud enough, hoping that the person at Burger King will hear this and realize that she's in big trouble. But the man, gives her the, be quiet sign, and he shakes his head no, and he again seems to be trying to get into the car. And at that point, she realizes there are two men here. They don't want my money. They don't want my car. They must want me. And with that, she decided that the next move would be hers, and whatever was going to happen would happen right then, right there in the parking lot of the Burger King restaurant. And that is where the first chapter ends. And I don't think I've revealed too much about the story by telling you that. The book then follows Marie on her journey, both to heal physically and emotionally from that event. We follow her as she has battles in both the criminal and the civil courtrooms. But in the end, it's still a struggle for Marie, despite what happens in both the civil and the criminal system. It's a struggle for her to overcome her anger and her fear, and that's really how the book ends. So that's the book in a nutshell. I'm going to tell you now how it is that I happened to write the story about Marie. It was actually a very natural thing for me to write her story. I've known her since 1978. In that year, my wife began working as an attorney in the legal department of Ameritrust. And a few months later, Marie joined that legal team. She had come from Jones Day, a large firm, and my wife was right out of law school. And Marie became her mentor, and I got to know Marie through my wife. One of the things that Marie told her husband while she was working with my wife is, if anything bad ever happens to me, call Leslie, that's my wife. And of course, 9 years later, in 1987, this event at Burger King, a few days after it happened, my wife did get a phone call from her husband, Chuck, who told her that the unimaginable had happened to Marie. And she was at the Cleveland Clinic. And at that point, we had 3 small children. 2 were not in school. My wife got my mom to come and babysit. And she quickly went out to the clinic to check on her friend. And so we have that immediate connection. And again, I don't want to spoil anything about the book, but I was involved. I was one of Marie's attorneys in one of the legal battles that came about because of this incident. So we've always had this immediate connection to her story. But that's just kind of some of the background, the actual details that led to writing her story. And we have to fast forward to September of 2017, and my first book has been released, and we're having a book launch party. And 2 of the people that we had invited were Marie and Chuck Grossman. The book had been out a couple of months. Chuck brought his copy to the event and said, I was signing it for him. And he just said kind of offhandedly, half seriously, you ought to write Marie's story. And my wife was at my side, and we nodded. And before I could answer him, he said, but, unlike your first book, Marie's story doesn't have a surprise ending. And I looked at my wife and said, well, I think there are plenty of surprises and twists and turns in Marie's story. And so I asked her that evening if she would be willing to allow me to write about it. She said she'd think about it. Well, unfortunately, months passed. Actually, it was in February. It's 5 months later. And I had started writing another book. I was 11 chapters along, and my wife said, I'm going to call Marie and see if she's made a decision. So my wife called her, and Marie said, well, I don't know that this would have much interest for readers. And she said, oh, I think it would be. So then Marie relented, and I began the process. Obviously, the first thing I had to do was refamiliarize myself with her story, and that we had a series of interviews with her and other people that were involved in the event. There were legal documents, newspaper articles, and fortunately, Marie had kept a journal during some of the things that had happened with some of her thoughts, and so she shared that with me. About 9 or 10 months later, after 2 or 3 drafts, the book was done. An agent, and I was able to secure an agent who found a publisher. And then in April of 2020, the book was released. So that's the story of how I came to write Marie's story. At this point, this really ends my prepared remarks. What I enjoy most at these meetings, these gatherings, is to answer your questions. The one thing that I'm always concerned about is that I may get a question that has a spoiler about what the book is about, or assumes or says something in the question. Well, I'll leave it up to Donna to if there's a way that we can ask a question so we don't give away the story, that would be great. So with that, I will take the first question.
Okay, I do have a couple questions. One of them is, after you retired as an attorney, you apparently decided to write a book. Had you taken any creative writing courses or done any serious writing before your first book?
A lot of people ask me that question. The last creative writing course that I took was I was a senior in high school. So the answer is no. I also did not take any type of creative writing workshops. But that being said, some attorneys, in terms of their work, do a lot of writing. And in my civil practice, writing was rather important, because a lot of times there are motions to get the case dismissed, and you have to write very persuasive and clear briefs to keep your case alive. So I took great pride in my writing. I did take legal writing courses, which I think helped me. And then about 20 years ago, I was walking through a bookstore, and a book caught my eye. It was called The Weekend Novelist. And it's funny, I think I may. Well, that's a nice thing about doing something at home. This is not the book that I saw, because it's out of print, but this is The Weekend Novelist Writes a Mystery. And it made a rather interesting promise. It says, from empty page to finished mystery in just 52 weekends, a dynamic step-by-step program. So so I bought the book, and I followed the formula, and I did write a novel about, I'd say 18, 20 years ago, which I knew I would never attempt to publish. I did it just to learn the process and to prime the pump that the book was written. And I won't say it's in the trash heap, but I've never done anything with it. But it was a great process. I had a new appreciation for authors. I saw how they did certain things, did certain techniques, and that was really the background that I have.
Okay, before I ask the next question, I have a comment about your book. Someone commented that it would have been a loss if Marie had not let you write the story. Her story had me on the edge of my seat. Her story and her actions were very inspiring. So there are some questions, again, about just your writing in general.
Okay.
What led you to become an author? And are there any local writer groups that you have found to be helpful? And any advice to an aspiring writer?
Well,
This also a little related.
yeah, that's similar to I know, just talking with you, Donna, you indicated that the Lorain Public Library has a few writing groups. Perhaps if you could tell this this listener what the library offers.
I actually planned to do that at the end, but I'll do it
Okay.
now. We do have, we had writers groups at most of our Lorain Public Library System branches. And now with virtual programming being what we are offering right now, we actually have a Facebook writers group and a Zoom writers group. So anyone can visit our website at lorainpubliclibrary.org and find information about those two.
Well, here's another.
Looking forward to the time when we can have those in person again.
Right. Here's another source that I found very, very helpful. And it's on the internet, and it's a company called Reedsy, Reedsy. It's based out of the United Kingdom, but they have tremendous amount of resources about writing. But one of the things that they've done is, if you're in the process of writing and you want somebody to proofread or be a copy editor or to critique your work, they have hundreds of people that they have vetted in various categories who you can bid. They'll bid on your project, and you'll get feedback from a professional, people who work for some of the big 5 publishing companies who are independent. So that's a terrific source. I used them to develop the cover for the first book. I use them for proofreading. It's a great source, and they have all types of courses that you can sign up for that are free. So that's a great vehicle.
So your books describe true events, yet you recreate thoughts and dialogues of your characters, something you probably have to invent. How much of your books are true, and how much of what you describe is based on your imagination?
I've been asked that question a lot too. It is a mixture of nonfiction with some imagination. I would say that in both The Edge of Innocence and The Edge of Malice, 90% is true, is nonfiction, and 10% is things that dialogues and thoughts of the characters that I have had to create. The genre for those first 2 books is known as narrative nonfiction or creative nonfiction. And it's different from another genre, which is called historical fiction. I mean, there's a very thin line between the two. I would, when I wrote The Edge of Innocence, I thought I'd written historical fiction. I didn't even know that there was such a thing called narrative nonfiction. And I was talking at the Lorain Historical Society, and I said it was historical fiction, and the commentator, who was Kelly Boyer Saggart, said, "No, yours is narrative nonfiction," and she explained what it was, and she was right. But in historical fiction, you create a character and you create a storyline, and it's bound in a historical era. In narrative nonfiction, creative nonfiction, your story is set. I mean, what happened is what happened, and you use your imagination to fill in details in terms of dialogues and thoughts, and fill in some of the gaps. But you do a lot of research, you immerse yourself in it, and you feel comfortable that the quotes and the dialogues are really in line with what happened, or very close to it.
So this question may be from someone who read both of your books. The question is there any connection between The Edge of Innocence and The Edge of Malice?
Yes. Both involve court cases. I mean, it has a lot. They both have a lot to do with the criminal justice system. The Edge of Malice also with the civil system. In both cases, in both books, I was trying to show some of the limitations in our system of justice. In The Edge of Innocence, which is a murder trial, I think by the end of the book, the readers believe that the jury got it wrong, that the system didn't work, and the system worked, but there are limitations. It doesn't always reach the right result. In Marie's case, in The Edge of Malice, we have both a criminal case and a civil case in which they work. They did what they were supposed to do, but it didn't make Marie whole. She still had the anger and the fear that had come from this incident. And it's basically, I'm trying to, the system may work, but don't have unreasonable expectations of what the law can do. That's kind of the common thread. They are different. I think you had one other comment earlier. I mean, there's certainly there are different themes, but there is that common thread.
Okay, since we're talking about both books, I understand here from this question that you wrote a book in between Innocence and Malice, and will it be published? And if so, what is the premise?
Okay. Yes, there is a third book. I returned to that after I finished The Edge of Malice, and the third book is fiction, although it is set in Elyria, Ohio. It's a malpractice case. Will it be published? Well, that's what my agent's trying to do right now. It's been with her for a couple of months. One of the things that I've learned is that it's much harder for the agent to place a book of fiction than it is of nonfiction. So I just have to be patient to hope that occurs. Now, one of the things, if somebody was going to ask me, I guess we're doing all right on time. If I thought perhaps I'd read a page and a half out of the third book, and let's see if
I think that's a great idea.
Okay, all right. This is Chapter 1, September 4th, 2017. It's called The Trap. Despite the slashing rain and strong winds, she couldn't make herself walk into the building. Rain pelted her as she stood frozen on the sidewalk. just a few feet from the door. In front of her, Dennis yanked the door's handle and quickly stepped inside. She watched as the debris swirled at his feet and then skittered across the dirty linoleum floor. Beyond his bulky frame, she could see gray walls made gloomier by the flickering of an aging fluorescent light. When she did not follow him, he stopped. "What's the matter with you? Get in here now," he commanded. For an instant, she thought he might drag her inside with his free hand, but instead he merely motioned for her to hurry. By now, he had to realize that she wanted no part of this. Their eyes locked, hers pleading, his impatient and insistent. She took a few steps inside and halted. As he pulled a large expandable file folder from under his raincoat, she waited obediently. When he smiled, she knew that his treasured papers were still dry and intact. Without a word, he abruptly headed toward the end of the hall where an elevator waited, its two green doors not quite touching. As if still battling the wind, she followed, her head down and her shoulders hunched. "I hope we have better luck with this one," she said quietly. "Jesus Christ, Cindy, tell me you didn't just say that," he shot back, suddenly turning to face her. Startled, she jerked her head up to meet his gaze. "I didn't mean anything by that. Really, I didn't," she said, squeezing her umbrella with both hands as if wringing out a washcloth. "Would you just shut up?" Dennis snapped. "You're one big defeatist. You know that?" Cindy considered responding, but instead looked away from him. They had already been turned down more than 10 times. That was a fact and had nothing to do with her so-called pessimism. She wanted to defend herself, but what was the point? Whenever she did, it always led to a fierce argument. They had fought enough during their marriage. Their toxic home life had destroyed their daughter. Now Heather was dead, and he wanted to sue her psychiatrist, shift the blame to someone else, and be absolved in the process. And the next paragraph shows that they're in the Robinson building in Elyria, so that you know that the setting is, it's a fictional setting, a malpractice case, and it'll be in Lorain County. So for those of you who like things set right here at home, it'll meet that criteria. So that's the third book.
Well, thank you so much for that preview, because there are multiple people asking what direction you're going to go with your next book. So now we have a sneak peek.
Yes, you do.
I would like to ask if you can just give a little brief synopsis of what the first book was about.
Oh, okay. Well, the first book is set in Lorain, Ohio. Again, the incident occurred in December. It is a murder trial. A man is accused of drowning his wife in scalding bath water. And my father was one of the defense attorneys for that case. I was 10 years old when that happened, and I remember answering the phone when the defendant had called from the jail. And then, 45 years after the trial, the trial's 1964, in 2005, I discovered my father's file on that. And that's the thing that instigated the writing for that book. In fact, this is the file. This is part of the file that I found with his closing argument and everything else. It's kind of The Edge of Innocence. For some of you who have read that, there is a remote chance, very, very remote chance, that it may become a mini series. There is a screenwriter in LA who has been pitching that for a 6 or 8 part miniseries. It's one thing to pitch it; it's another one to find a company that will produce it. But fingers crossed, maybe that will happen. And one thing that I've always insisted that if that did happen, I would love to see parts of it filmed here in Lorain. So maybe that will happen. But anyway, it's fun to think about.
So this is what the book looks like, The Edge of Innocence. I read it's very fascinating, very good descriptions of different areas of Lorain, and it was fun just to have it be so local and to try to picture the different areas that you were speaking of in the book.
Seems
So
that everybody oh, go ahead. I was going to say, it seems most anybody, okay, I was just going to add to that, most anybody that's from Lorain, if they read that book, they'll know somebody or they'll know somebody's family that's mentioned in it. But go ahead, sorry to interrupt there.
Okay, this last question is, well, I guess more could come through, but are there any special challenges for authors during the pandemic?
Yes and no. First of all, writing is basically a solitary activity. You're by yourself. You're in a room. It's not. So it doesn't affect a writer creating a book. If you're dealing with editors and agents or publishers, there's no. You can do that by phone, by email. So that's certainly not a problem. But The Edge of Malice was released on April 14th of 2020. So that's right in the middle of the pandemic. And, bookstores are closed. We wanted to have a book launch. There were some book signings that had been scheduled. And of course, those things are all off the board. The other huge challenge was that the publisher had furloughed their entire marketing department at the time the book was released. So, because of The Edge of Innocence, I had published that through Amazon, and it was basically self-published. I knew some of the things to do to market, and my wife did as well, so that we did a lot of the marketing early on, and so got help also from Marie and her husband Chuck in terms of friends and family that might be interested. And we did sell out the first printing, even with the publisher being really disabled at the time that it came out. So yeah, that certainly is a challenge.
Let me check and see if there's any other questions here.
Okay.
And it doesn't look like it. Is there anything else you'd like to share with us?
No. Is there a way that we know who is actually tuned in, or if there's anybody here that I should have a special shout out to
I think that maybe you want to have a shout out to let's see, the book group of Jerry Lee Sis and company.
Okay, yeah, I know. Okay, and Stephanie. Okay.
So those are the only names I'm familiar with.
Okay, all right, okay.
Okay. Well, anyway, thank you so much for joining us. If anyone would like some more information about David Miraldi and his books, you can visit his website, real easy, davidmiraldi.com. And again, we do have writers groups, and we would love to have anyone participate. Please check our website, lorainpubliclibrary.org, and find out about our Facebook writers group and our Zoom writers group.
All right.
And
well, thank you.
Any last
All
words,
right,
David?
David? Thank you. It was a lot of fun. All right. Take care.
Thank you. Bye, everyone. Bye-bye.